Hey.
So, the last 4 or 5 weeks, we've been diving a little deeper into just the advanced market analysis. So we pretty much covered everything you can cover when it comes to analyzing a market. So now we're progressing, moving on to our next phase, our next segment here, which is going to dive a little pretty deep, honestly, because since we've done basics of underwriting, and this is supposed to be the advanced segment of that, we're going to dive really deep. So this first call isn't going to be super deep. It's just going to be baseline, like how to understand the analyzer, running through an actual underwriting of a deal. We're going to be looking at some baseline things when it comes to underwriting, but nonetheless, good practice for everyone to kind of run through this. And then next week, and every week progressing, every Thursday, we come back talking about underwriting. We're going to be getting into the really nitty gritty weed specifics of deal analysis and everything that comes with it. So with that said, pulling up Slack. Reggie, what did you want me to pull up?
Well,
is it all this stuff?
So I guess let me preface some of this. So we're going to just jump right into it. Josh and I kind of tossed some ideas back and forth about how best to do this, and we thought it would be good if we just underwrote something fresh on the fly. Just kind of started going through the process, maybe talk through it. So at this point, we're already comfortable with the market. So, we've done the market analysis. So let's just assume that we're good. We're in the right market. I had a broker send me a T12 and a rent roll, I don't know, a month or so ago, maybe more. And I have not had a chance to look at it. And that's just because, well, a few reasons, but it just wasn't high on my priority list, but I've been meaning to. It's an off-market deal. And anyway, I thought you guys could get some value out of it. We thought this would be a good beta test for, or a good live demonstration of how we begin to underwrite. So I guess one of the first things, Josh, if you want to pull up the Michael Blanc analyzer.
Yeah, I'm pulling up everything. I'm trying to pull up everything.
So everybody starts at maybe kind of a different place, and underwriting is iterative to an extent. But where I like to start is if I'm using the Michael Blanc analyzer, then I'll just populate that first scenario with the T12 and the rent roll data, and I don't really change too much. The only things that I might modify from the original T12 are one-time anomaly expenses, if they kind of commingled capital expenditures and operating expenses, then I might try to pull that out if I have that kind of information. But basically, I just try to leave it alone because I want to see what the deal looks like as is. How you coming there, Josh?
I'm coming. It's a bunch of documents to open, and I'll try to somewhat organize. All right.
Yeah, and I know part of this, I know a few of you are currently underwriting stuff, and so I'm hoping this will maybe help give you some perspective, maybe give you some ideas about how to treat your own underwriting. All right, so this is really the first time I'm even taking a look at this at the T12 here. So this looks pretty standard, pretty routine. Typically I've come to recognize some of the more popular property management software outputs, and so I can tell right off this is not from AppFolio, Buildium, or RealPage. This is probably something a little lesser known. Could even be a mom and pop type of setup, which, just to give you some background, the broker that sent me this, he's from out of town. So it was interesting because this is about 15 minutes from where I live. So I'm very familiar with the area. And I was talking with a local broker here. He's actually the only broker in the county for commercial multifamily or just commercial properties in general. And he actually knew the owner. And this is just a coincidence that we started talking about it. But one thing that he told me was that he knew firsthand of an offer that the owner turned down last year for way more than this well, I think he's a wholesaler actually, more than the wholesaler is telling me that the guidance is. So I think last year he turned down an offer for 14 million. And now this broker or wholesaler, I can't remember which, he's telling me the guidance is mid 11s. So that's the first thing I'm going to have, I'm going to have my antenna up for to see, like, why is there such a divergence between what happened last year and now? So he doesn't give a whole lot. There's no OEM with this. So I know a lot of times I get spoiled off the OEMs because they spoon feed you a lot of data, and really all you have to do is go back and validate it. Well, when you underwrite a deal like this, I thought this was a little more appropriate, a little more of a challenge, I guess, because we're doing it from scratch. There's nothing really for us to rely on. So there's a methodology for going some of this stuff. Some of it you're just going to have to use intuition and any data that you got. But basically where I would start is, I would just work down the top, from the top of the analyzer down. So we're looking at the marketing package. So, column C through E there. He's already told us mid 11s, 56 units. Okay. About 205K a unit. And Josh, are you able to pull this property up on Google? I know there's a picture there. It's called Island Oaks in Orange Beach. I did take a look at it. So just keep in mind $200,000 a unit. Like, what kind of like multifamily property would you guys say this is, just based on price alone? Any thoughts?
You said it's 56 units, 11.5.
Yeah, 56 units, 11.5. So we're talking about 200K a door. It's that first picture, Josh.
I was trying to see if they had a website.
Yeah, there you go. So when I saw this, I was like, okay, 200K a door, huh? I've literally seen stuff for 25% of this, an hour and a half north of us in like a rural part of town. But they look to be perhaps single story. I thought they were townhomes too, but okay. Well, looks like there are some townhomes. Looks like very outdated. I mean, they've still got the black appliances. The darker wood colors. You can kind of tell. Yeah, it's an aged property. It's probably due for some updates. Is that scored concrete? What is that?
Oh, looks like it.
Huh, interesting. Well, so anyway, I like the visual because when I think 200K a door, I think luxury. I think, I mean, even here close to the beach, that seems pretty high for a unit of multifamily. Marbella, the one that I mentioned maybe a few weeks ago that we underwrote and actually submitted an LOI on, they were asking 208 a door, and that was a 2021 new construction.
Oh, wow.
Really very close to the beach. So I can already see that the pricing perhaps may be off.
Maybe this doesn't look professional or A class at all.
Yeah. Now, does it have the potential to be A class? Maybe.
Yeah.
It would take a lot of CapEx.
Is this right next to the beach?
I mean, you're probably 5 or 10 minutes from the beach. It's pretty close.
Is that what you think inflates the price or the asking price?
Yeah, prices down here really have skyrocketed. Just to give you an idea, I bought my house down here in November 2021, and I got it appraised recently, or I had an agent comp it out for me, and according to her, she said the market said it was worth 50% more than it was a year and a half ago.
Damn.
And so that's the kind of appreciation we've seen just in the area. Now, I'm on the Gulf Shore side. Like I said, this is in Orange Beach. It's only 15 minutes away from me, but Gulf Shores and Orange Beach they're both very pricey like that for the most part. So anyway, if you go down to repairs and reserves, Josh.
Here or in here?
Yeah, right there.
What about the down payment? Do you ever usually touch that, or you usually leave it at 25%?
Well, That's a good question. Used to, I would leave it at say 20 to 25%, especially if we were putting some bridge debt on it, from Oakworth or something. But these days, I would push it to 30. Just because, if we're getting perm debt on it, it may even be 35, but I think 30 is a good place to start. So when I look at repairs and reserves, I always hold back. I always start by holding back 10% of the purchase price for repairs and reserves. And, it can fluctuate based on what you plan on doing with the property and your working capital needs. But I found that's usually a pretty good place to start. And where I usually end up is within about plus or minus, 5% of that. So, like 5 or 10% or so. So if it's not 10% of purchase price, maybe 5 to 15%, I guess that's what I mean. So, so
Is that
far,
right?
what is that?
No,
Yeah, no.
I'm struggling over here.
One
How
more
many
zero.
zeros?
There you go. There you go. All right. So we're already looking at close to $5 million, on a raise. So that's interesting. All right. So what do we have for gross potential income there, Josh? If we're just putting in our,
Can y'all see this?
it is like a
Sons and
CNI
sons.
chart.
What was that amount? What did you say that percentage was again, Reggie? Of the gross amount of the acquisition? You said 5%?
I usually start off at 10%, but
10%. Okay, that's why I was like, wait, my math is definitely not right here.
yeah, but what I found is after I've iterated and underwriting is done, it may be anywhere from 5 to 15% of purchase. But
Okay.
so you imagine kind of a bell curve about what it could be. But a couple of times 10% has almost been right on the money. So I've kind of stuck with that, at least initially.
Yeah,
Are you
good
talking
ballpark number to slap in there.
Are you talking about for CapEx
And reserves.
Yeah.
and reserves? Okay.
Yeah, and that's the catch-all bucket. That's for CapEx, reserve, working capital, contingency funds. We can talk about how to split off some of that and how to estimate what you need as we move through. But again, we're just moving right down the analyzer. And I did actually crunch a few of the numbers so we'd have them, so we didn't have to sit here and do a bunch of calculator work. All right, so
Where do I need to go for that? The rent roll?
Yeah, you can go to the rent roll now. All right,
This
so
looks like Buildium, doesn't it?
yeah, this actually does look like Buildium. Yeah, so yeah, I think I told a fib earlier. I actually did look at this. So what I did is I said, okay, they've got one vacant unit. Total leased rent is $71,820 a month. And so since there's one vacant unit, only divide that by 55. And let's see, what did that give me? That gave me a leased rent of $1,306 a month. So that's what their current leased average, leased rent is averaging right now. About just a little over $1,300 a month.
You talking about right here, this one?
No, that's that would be. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Josh. That's it. Rent.
So not market rent, but this one. So this is where they think they can take it.
That's right. The broker's saying $1,450. We're not there yet, but we're going to test that in a little bit. Okay, so if you go back to the T12, Josh, I believe that this was a cash basis. So that's not actually the market rents per se. That's actually the rental income. So that's after vacancy concessions, basically the gross income, and then they have a little bit of other income. Look at that.
Yeah, I
So
don't usually like to include late fee income because you have zero idea how many late fees you're actually going to collect. So I usually just leave that off the income potential.
Yeah, when I do the marketing package, like I said, I put most of it in there as is. Because like, for instance, I was digging into in the portfolio today, and one of our properties. I mean, we routinely see $4,000 to $5,000 a month in other income. This is at a property where leased rents right now are about $65,000 to $66,000 a month. So, I mean, we're almost running, 10% of rent as other income. And that's late fees, that's pet fees, that's, laundry, anything, you can imagine there. So again, so this is a good example of how everybody kind of approaches this a little bit differently. Josh takes it out. I like to leave it in. Doesn't mean one way is better than the other, because Josh has a great point. Like, there's no way to predict, how many late fees you're going to get in a year. Hypothetically, if you're doing your tenant screening right, you shouldn't have too much late fees. And if you're monitoring collections, if you do start to accumulate a lot of late fees, that means people are, paying behind, and perhaps you need to change how you're doing things, or either get a little more aggressive collecting, or maybe start filing some evictions.
So I added these three together: cable, internet, electricity, and pet fees. I don't think forfeited deposits is something you could expect, nor bank service fee income. Banks are usually charging money, not paying you money. So
I
that
wonder
puts
if
me,
that has something to do with like an online portal payment charging a service fee to the tenants. That's interesting, man.
that's what I
About
get from my other
$100 each month.
income.
Okay,
And you said there was only one unit vacant?
that's right. Now, don't forget, Josh, that 769 number, that's not gross potential. That's already after vacancy.
Right. What is it though?
So
Yeah, because this is rent actually collected.
yeah.
Because they don't have anything in here for vacancy.
So you can just assume zero vacancy. I mean, I know that's not accurate what vacancy actually is, but that'll help us get the numbers we need for the marketing package. Fortunately, this is not where we're going to make an offer on it. Again, this is just to give us kind of a portrayal of how the property has been performing, how it's been managed over the past year. All right, what's next?
Expenses.
Yeah, no, I don't think we need to go through and enter in each line item. One of the nice things about this analyzer is you can do a manual override right there in, what was that, C43 through 45. So if you have like a specific number that you can save a lot of time, because they don't always slice and dice the expenses exactly how the Michael Blanc analyzer does it. Now, if I were sitting doing this by myself, yeah, I'd probably do each line item, because that's just the nature of my personality. But just so we don't spend a whole lot of time on data entry tonight, I would say that we would just go and let's just browse through the expenses and make sure that there's nothing, there's not anything glaring in there that we perhaps should take out. I mean, so far I don't see anything. The business tax, property tax. Hey, Josh, if you just scroll down to the expenses, what I was saying is I don't think we need to go and enter each line item. We can probably just do a manual override. I'm just kind of scanning the expenses to make sure there's nothing glaring that sticks out that's obvious that we should pull out. And I don't really see anything. And so I'm seeing total expenses of about $404,000. Is that kind of what you're tracking?
Net income, total expenses, yeah, 404,827.
Yeah.
Hey, Reggie, why would you want to remove an expense that they have sent over? I mean, wouldn't it help whoever's underwriting the deal if there's additional expenses in the rent roll? Or I guess in the T12?
It definitely would benefit a buyer to leave as much in there because, you know, if you're reducing NOI, then you reduce the valuation, but you also want this thing to appraise when you go to buy it. And so nowadays, how people make offers is based on the pro forma, not necessarily on the T12, but the T12 does need to justify to the bank that you can meet debt service coverage, and you know, the appraiser will have to make sure that it appraises. And so I try to be realistic. And so, like for instance, if I see they put new roofs on there and they put it under, you know, operating income, then that just is give me an accurate picture of how the property's been operated, because the roofs are, you know, that's CapEx. It's not going to impact the valuation. I mean, any appraiser worth his salt would pull it out. So I may as well, you know, kind of align myself. That's how I typically underwrite. Align myself with what I think a lender / appraiser is going to value it at. Did that answer your question, Paul?
Yeah, no,
Or
perfect.
is that Ethan?
Well, this is insurance. I was like, where is all of this money coming from?
Oh yeah, they had some damage from a hailstorm, which in that picture, I think you guys may have seen looks like newer metal roofs on there. And so that's where that came from. So notice they stuck that at the bottom below NOI, because that is not a recurring income item. So you would not put it on the top, just like, you know, I mean, that's kind of how ours shows up on, or how it showed up on Central now, Josh. All right. So if we look at the analyzer, they're running right at a 50% operating expense ratio. And that's after we, you know, took out some of that other income. So they're almost operating right on the money. So I would be interested to see how things are going to shake out. It's if we look below at the bottom, I usually just go ahead and kind of set some of the debt criteria. Yeah, perhaps we could assume that we're getting perm debt on this. So Josh, you could probably put 6% there now. Fannie and Freddie's running what, 5.3 to 5.8, give or take this week. So I think 6 is reasonable. You could put 6.5. Again, this is just one of those areas where everybody has a slightly different philosophy on, is it a 0.5% up or down? But that'll just be something that, you know, you'll have to develop. All right. So we've got the initial part done. Now, Josh, do you want to go over to the rent calculator over there?
This over here.
Yeah. So in the Michael Blanc analyzer, after I've filled out that first column with the marketing package, the OEM, or just this the data, that's when I go over here and start looking at target rents. Because I need to make an offer on the property, and I need to know what it's capable of before I make an offer. So this is all 2-bed, 2 baths. So, and there's 56 of them. They are, what are they? Oh yeah, they're 1,150 square feet, which that'll be important a little bit later when we start kind of looking at the competitive analysis and then look at affordability, because we'll kind of use those two pieces of data to hopefully triangulate a rent potential or a new market rent. Because right now I'm going with the loose assumption that we're going to go in there and renovate. I mean, just by looking at the pictures, if they're averaging $1,300 in lease rent right now, just think what it could achieve if you did go in and, you know, invest $10,000 a door in renovations. You know, maybe you could push it higher, but we don't know just yet. All right, so yeah, this gives us, I think the average rents, Josh, were $1,306. That was the current rent average.
1,306. I just took this number and divided it by 12. No, divided by 56 units.
Yeah, divided by 55, since that's a leased rent number. It doesn't include that vacant unit. And this is why Josh and Matt call me the forensic accountant.
Always catching the small stuff.
Like,
Just
man, there's a
pull it.
decimal point. All right, cool. All right, so that's what our picture currently looks like. Right now, they're pulling in about $73,000 a month in rent. So we want to know what we can reasonably target. So I look at two things to try to establish that. I look at the median household income in the area, and then I try to backtrack a rent number, and that gives me a gauge of affordability. Can people in the area afford these rents? And then I also look at what the competition is doing. So I'll look at the rent comps. So if there's a big divergence, that might tell us something. Like I think some of the guys in California, Greg and Brandon and those guys, we did the calculation we're about to do for affordability, and it was like way off, but they're in California. And so everybody knows that housing over there is, it's much higher than it is in the rest of the nation. But they ended up being lower than most of the rent comps in the area. So even the affordability, even though that didn't give me a kind of a warm and fuzzy, all the other competition in the area was nearly fully occupied, and they were getting greater than the current rents. So that was a good indicator. All right, so I looked up some of this data earlier, so we didn't have to go through and crunch it. So we'll talk about the affordability piece first. If I look at the median household income for Orange Beach, and Orange Beach is pretty small, so it's I'm okay with making the assumption that the town or the city of Orange Beach, that the median household income represents the neighborhood of this particular multifamily property. So median household income, it's $87,119. Pretty decent. I think it's above the U.S. average by 10 or 15,000. I think the current median is what, in the 60s, high 50s, low 60s. So I used to approach this by using the property management rule of thumb. I'm sure some of you have heard it, but and if you've rented an apartment before, you might even have been at the mercy of it, especially if you're like right out of college, not making a whole lot of money. You have to earn 3 times rent and income to qualify to live there. And that's just kind of a rough gauge. Some property managers say 3 times rent. Some say 3.5. Some say 2.5. Just depends on what part of the US you're in.
Reggie, I just want to throw a little info out there with it.
Yeah, sure.
We've shifted, the company I work for owns about 80 properties across the country, and probably 75% of them we've shifted to 2.5 times income. We've lowered the requirement for practically every community at this point.
Really?
Just because we're not seeing, we don't want to lower rents, but we also aren't seeing people's incomes rising at the same rate as rents. So they're assuming by lowering the requirement, they can attract a greater renter base for a higher rent price.
Or get more delinquency.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I would be very interested in watching collections after they made that change, and see if they, some of those collection metrics got worse. I'd be very interested. And I don't know, it kind of makes me a little uneasy. Are the properties like geographically diverse? Or are they kind of like,
Yeah, they're geographically diverse, practically 36, 38 states, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, thanks for that, Sam.
No problem.
So if I just go through the calc, so I used to just take that number, divide it by 3, and then convert it to a monthly value, and I'd use that as my affordability indicator. Well, I learned of a slightly better way that gives you, it takes a few extra steps, but it gives you, I think, a more reliable number for affordability. And I learned this from a CCIM instructor who he teaches market analysis. So I'll have to send you guys a link in Slack to some of his YouTube videos. He's good. But basically what you're doing is you're taking median household income, you're calculating the discretionary income. So that's your income after taxes. And then you multiply that by 35%. And that's That's supposed to be what the typical person spends on housing as a percent of their discretionary income. And so when I do that, I get a little more than $24,000 a year that somebody in Orange Beach probably spends on housing expenses. And so the last step is to subtract utilities off of that, because you just want to look at rent. You want to look at effective rent. And so I know in the area, the average utility bill runs about $450 a month. So if I take $450 from the monthly number that I got after all those calcs, I get $1,582 a month. So that's what people in the area could likely afford to pay for this property. So Josh, if you would just want to like stick this in like a little white cell somewhere, just for reference. So $1,582 a month. That's our affordability metric, if you will. And this isn't perfect. This isn't a perfect system, and I'm making some generalizations here, but you know, as you get more experience with underwriting, you'll learn that, okay, maybe I don't just draw a 1 mile radius circle and call that the neighborhood. Maybe it's irregular. You know, maybe you're on one side of a river or one side of a railroad track and the other side is the bad part of town, and it's two completely different markets. Only you can pull that out by doing the research. Okay, so now we want to look at what the market is bearing in the multifamily market here. So I think we talked about Marbella a few times. And so actually used that OM to give us some quick and easy comps. So Josh, if you want to pull up the OM that I dropped in your Slack. Oh, there it is. Beautiful. So this is the new construction I was telling you guys about. Built in 2021. They're getting $1.64 a square foot in rents. Yeah, so they were really pushing, and they're, you know, up almost 96% occupied. Yeah, 1587 market rent, and look at that affordability metric, 1582. Now, I also know that Orange Beach, Gulf Shores, they have a multifamily permitting moratorium, so nobody can even apply for a permit. And so developers, we're just in slightly short supply of multifamily housing over here. And so that is kind of weighing on things, but just something interesting to know. But you can see the kitchens here. I mean, everything is just brand new and nice compared to what we were seeing.
What we just saw
at the subject property. Yeah. And, you know, they got a few amenities, fitness center, nice pool. It's pretty nice. I toured it, so I've seen it. It's a nice property. All right. So if you scroll down to the rent comps, Joshua,
I'm trying to get to. There's just so much stuff they slap in here.
Oh, there you go. Now keep in mind, we're already jazzed about this market. Like we've already done our market analysis. We know this is where we want to be. This deal got dropped in our lap, and now we're trying to underwrite the property. So see where that red star is? That's not our property. Our property is closer to 6 and 7. If you go east a little bit, that's where Orange Beach is. So I looked at 6 and 7, that's Cypress Village, Perdido, Isle. One was built in 08, one was built in 2016. Our property was built in 2015. And so I feel like those are reasonably good comps. I always like to say, I like to have comps that are, their construction date was within the same decade, or say plus or minus 10 years of the subject property. And so I like that. If I look at occupancy, 99%, 97%. So that tells me that there's probably low supply. There's probably room for rent growth. Now, if I look at the square footage, like, wow, one is 2,000 square feet, you know, almost 2,200 square feet. The other one is 1,212. Now, I've been to Cypress Village. I used to have some friends there. They're nice. They're like 2-story townhomes. They're very, very spacious, which, you know, they're getting $2,200 in rent, but it's because, you know, it's the biggest comp on the block. So I'll probably scratch through that one. I would say $1.03 per square foot probably isn't applicable to us. Remember, ours is 1105 or 1150 square feet. All right, so market rents at Perdido Isle, $15.97. Okay. Effective rent, $15.97. So they're getting what they're asking. And their effective rents are $1.32. And look at that, average rents in the market are $1.33. All right, so we're starting to see a lot of data that triangulates, a lot of data that supports each other. And when you come across that kind of data, it's almost like you're playing connect the dots, and you're starting to realize that you're connecting the right dots. And so it's all things, little checks and balances that help give you some reassurance that you're on the right track. All right, so that's just to say that now remember, this is a competitive analysis, and so we want to see what the competition is doing, what they're charging based on the amenities they have. Josh, you want to scroll down to Perdido Isle? It's number 7. Let's just take a quick look at it. There we go. All right, so they have some 2 bedrooms and some 3 bedrooms, but they're mostly 2 bedrooms. So something to keep in mind. Their 2 bedrooms are $1.32 a square foot. Let me see. Okay, pretty nice property. I know ours was built in 2015, if you can believe it. It's only 8 years old. So I still have confidence that this is a pretty good comp. I wish we had more, and there may be some out there, but just for, to lubricate the curriculum and help move us a little quicker, I thought I'd just use what is in this OM here. All right, so let's just say that $1.32 a square foot, that's what we could compete with in the market. And so I think I assumed $1.33 a square foot. So that would give us $1,529 a month. And that's what our competition is charging. But if you look at everybody, I mean, they're almost fully occupied. And once you guys, if you haven't already gotten deep into operations, what you'll find is it's pretty easy, relatively speaking, to get to 90% occupancy. To go from 90 to 95 takes a bit more work, and then to get from 95 to like 99, let's just say, that's really hard. Like it's not a linear path. Like the closer you get to full occupancy, the harder it is to fill that last unit sometimes, unless you're just really in a hot market. All right, so I like to be conservative. So we've got 1582 for the affordability, and 1529 is what the comps are kind of suggesting. So I would say I would call our target rent being 1529 a month. And I think, we like to be conservative. It's always nice to have an upside surprise, not a downside one. So Josh, if you want to stick that into the target rent, that will give us our revenue potential.
Quick math.
Quick math. All right, go over to the rent calculator. I just want to kind of show everybody kind of the month-to-month difference. So if you stick that 1529 number, and for the average target rent, what does that give us? All right, so we're okay. That's giving us over a $200 rent bump. So not too bad. Let's see how this shakes out from here. So now that we've got the affordability, we've done the rent comps, we've kind of honed in on our target rent. What do you guys think is next?
You're understanding the expenses a little deeper, maybe?
Yeah, that would be a great place to start. Now, how I typically do this, and see, we're right here at 6:15 now. Josh and I debated on how far to go tonight because there is a lot of subject matter to get into. But with the expenses, how I like to project out, I actually like to just start creating the pro forma. And I think I've shared with a few of you, and maybe even in the sessions here, but we are putting together kind of like this, ultimate multifamily, toolbox or toolkit, if you will. And so right now I'm developing it, and I've got some stuff that I like, but I'm familiar with the Michael Blanc analyzer, and that's what we're using in the class now. So what I've been doing is creating this pro forma, the one that I shared with everybody. I use that as the template. I just go line item by line item and project out each line. And I make some assumptions there, but I guess I'll take this as an opportunity to kind of stop and see if anybody has any questions, because I want to make sure that everybody like understands what we've done so far, and and if anybody disagrees, if there's something that somebody wants to debate, hey, let's talk about it.
And I want to throw something out there.
Yeah.
So your rent market analysis, we didn't really look at how competitive this property is relative to the comps, like in terms of amenities and all that stuff. And do you think that there could be a significant difference between what we just analyzed in comps and what a deeper dive into the market might look like? Because that's something I ran into, and it kind of stumped me a little bit.
Yeah, the deeper we go, the more we'll pull some of that out. I didn't choose to go into the amenity analysis, which we could actually. Josh, can you pull up the Island Oaks on apartments.com? I just want to see what they show for amenities, because I have a good idea what the rest of the area provides.
It says they're charging $14.50, but that ain't the case.
Well, that's list rent. That's asking rent. So the rent roll is a few months old actually, and so they may be getting that now. Because I
Now
mean,
it
you can see.
says $10.90 a month.
Yeah, somebody didn't update the verbiage there. Okay.
Maybe it's Mitchell Company.
All right. You got jokes. All right, let's see what they have for amenities. I think there's a
Waterfront.
little option.
There it is.
Oh, is that it? Okay, here we go. All right. Looks like
You
they
got a
have
washer
Wi-Fi.
and dryer inside the unit. It's always nice.
Yeah, and what I thought was interesting is so when the broker sent me the email, there's no OEM. He just kind of gave me some high level info on the property. But what was interesting is that the landlord is he has responsibility for all the utilities, and so that tells me that we have an opportunity to capture some other income. And as some of you have seen recently that I know are underwriting some properties, like sometimes other income can be significant if it wasn't there before, if you start from scratch. So that could potentially be something that helps bolster our deal a little bit and make it worth it, especially at the steep asking price. Now I do expect stuff in Orange Beach to be a little more expensive than Gulf Shores, but not by a whole lot. And so when I think about the new construction here versus this, almost 8-year-old construction in Orange Beach, and they're asking the same per door, I still have a little bit of a problem with that, but it's not completely out of the question. Again, I always let the numbers paint the picture. I do look at the qualitative stuff too, but I also have to look at the quantitative. Well, Josh, what do you want to do from here? Because if I pull out that pro forma, then we're going to be here all night. And
yeah, no, we're opening up. That'd be definitely for another time. I was thinking we just finished running through this so we can take, I know we didn't really actually put the expenses here, but usually I like to finish these out. Like, what are these actually going to be currently versus what will they be on the projected side? Are we going to change anything in the other income? And then what will be the differences between what we're maybe paying now on some of our expenses versus what do we think we could pay when we hit stabilization? And how does that differ from the marketing package?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So we talk about some of the stabilized assumptions that we typically make. It's going to be market dependent. Some people might assume 5% vacancy. I don't think I've ever assumed that. We usually go with a 10 and 2. But what I calculated earlier, if we're getting $200 and some odd dollars a month and lost a lease per unit, that comes to $150,000 over the course of a year in revenue. That's $75,000 in NOI that we could be getting. And at a 5 cap, that's see, what is 75,000 divided by 5%?
Wait, start that calculation over again. How did you just come up with that number?
Yeah, sorry. All right, so if I said the rent boost potential was based on that, the rent market analysis, 1529, I said, okay, we got $223 a door per month and lost a lease, or $150,000 a year and lost a lease.
So you're saying this
Right.
number would be higher, but not once we hit stabilization, right?
What? So yeah. So you're looking at projector right now. So vacancy, and right now in this market, everybody's above 95% unless they're in lease up, which there's one comp in lease up. It's like 76%. But I would actually be comfortable with 8 and 2 in this market. You know, if we reach that. Now, on the other income line, if you want to pull up the T12, Josh, we can perhaps take a look at some of the utilities and see what the potential might be there.
I had it somewhere.
All right, so we're just going to ignore the income that they have there because we've already kind of taken care of that. All right, utilities. All right, so looks like, okay, we're not gonna talk about gas. We're not gonna talk about, well, I have seen this trend. So, you know, I think water, sewer is usually the first thing that people hone in on. Josh, have you known anybody that bills back for electricity? I mean, I think it's usually.
Yeah, I've seen people rubs everything. They can't ever rubs 100%, but I've seen it before. I don't know about fire protection. I don't know what's going on with that, but electricity, water, sewer, gas, and you know, some people just do the trash fee as a separate fee.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So people are not paying the electricity directly to the city or to the person controlling the electrical municipality there?
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at, Samurai. When I look at this, $954 a month, that's probably common area lighting. That's probably not, you're probably not paying for a tenant's electricity. That's probably a vacant unit or two.
Yeah,
and maybe
if that's the question, no, I haven't seen anyone charge back for common area, but I have seen people charge back if it's not individually metered for power.
I guess where I was going with this is, you know, we kind of have to think about and pick and choose what utilities we have the potential to charge back for. So I think it's going to be water, sewer, garbage, and cable. Now, those are some broad assumptions, and we'll have to validate them later. But if we just take, what is that? Let's just say, what, 30,000 and 30,000? So $60,000 in other income potential.
Were we doing this one too? Cable internet?
That was going to be my assumption.
I'm coming up with 97,000 for this one, this one, this one, and this one.
I didn't include the water and fire protection. I just did sewer and garbage.
So 76.
Okay. What is fire
So-
protection? I don't understand.
That's
What
I'm
are we
saying.
what are we charging for there?
I don't know if that's a sprinkler. Well, that's what I was getting at, Josh. Like water and fire protection, it's kind of like they coupled two things, one of which I don't think we would charge for.
So we just add
Let's-
this number here.
Maybe they put in the fire hydrants in every unit.
I wouldn't add F24 because we're already capturing some of that other income they charge. But I think 75, 76K is reasonable based on what I've seen in the T12 there. Now,
But
again,
that's
something like
that plus this, right? Because we already had this from the other income.
Right, but that's not stuff that we can necessarily predict. Like, you know, the security forfeitures, some of the
I
what
think
the
what we
late
had
fees
there
and stuff.
was- We had cable and internet, electricity, and pet fees. I think those are the only three things I added.
All right, so if
So they
if
are
our
actually
u-
making some money with electric.
okay, so if our utility chargeback total that we calculated is 76, we probably wouldn't include cable and internet. You know, we would only want to include the pet fees, and the electricity, I guess, because that's not something that we considered.
So what's the reasoning behind excluding cable and internet income?
Because it's built into our number already.
I thought it was built into the other income. This one right here. Or it was built into.
Yeah,
No,
if you
I'm
go back to the
confused.
T12 on the expenses. All right, you look at the utility charges. When you added those three numbers up, you got 76K, and that was what the cable and internet was for.
They're actually making money on their internet.
A little bit.
It's all making sense. So we have 76,000 plus whatever those other two ones were.
You can just call it 80. You know, Matt talks about his filters. This is kind of what we're doing. We take swags, but as we move along, we take more and more calculated swags. Especially when we go back and iterate and validate some of the numbers that we're kind of putting in there. All right, so is that what we're calling the projected performance of the property on the
Mhm.
income side?
This one.
Okay. All right, so right now they're pulling in $800,000 in income. We're saying we can increase that by 25%. Not bad. Now we haven't gone through the expense.
Do we want to adjust these? I think we did these already, but what about these?
Yeah, if we do those, that might take a little bit more time, and that's why I was saying, like, with the pro forma, because like we've got 150K just in loss to lease. Now, hopefully, we're going to be working some of that out over the course of the first year. So we'll have to, and this kind of goes to the next step. I create like a rent matrix, and I look at when all the leases expire. And I start making some assumptions based off that, like, okay, when this lease expires, they'll move out, we'll renovate, we'll release at market rents. And so I'll build in a month of vacancy for that turn, which hopefully is conservative. And then the next month I show we're immediately at market rents. Now, if you're in more of a challenged municipality, it may be harder to do that. Sometimes you have to watch your policy. Like I know in California, you have to give like a more extended notice if you're non-renewing. You have to specifically tell them if they have a month-to-month lease that, you know, there's hurdles. So, but if you've done everything correctly, then I think some of those assumptions are typically safe. But I know they are in this market.
So,
Yeah, so
what do you think about my assumption then here? The way I would look at this without taking a super deep dive and doing the pro forma, based on what we know already, would be that there is going to be some fairly decent, maybe that's around 10%, maybe it's around 15% worth of vacancy in the first year, because it sounds like we've got to do a lot of renovations. And there's probably going to be some natural turnover from that over the course. Maybe should be just 12 months. You'd like to think, if you've got some good contractors to do 56 units. Just a lot of interior updates for the most part with some exterior things, but that's not really necessarily going to kick your tenants out. So my assumption in the first year would probably be that it would be maybe at 10%, maybe closer to 15% on the vacancy side.
I would say 15. That's what we did for the Mobile 148.
Would you say that there's probably going to be some additional like delinquency, lost lease?
Yeah, so there's going to be about 150K in loss to lease in the first year.
But
That's assuming we don't
what
chip
this-
away at any of it.
So would you want to put this number here, percent, and then add loss to lease?
Yeah, so we need to be at the target rent because that's what we're making the offer on. Yeah, so you can probably 15 and 15. So I think that would be reasonable. Now we're probably not going to get all of that other income, but you know, if I were just what we're doing right now is more high level, I might just take an average of where we're at and where we want to be, and just split the difference and use that as, you know, potentially other income. Now next week, what we're going to do is we're going to do a more detailed version of this using the pro forma, and I'll show you how those assumptions come into play. And then you'll actually have a calculated vacancy loss allowance. You'll have a calculated loss to lease. We can talk about bad debt assumptions, and, you know, I'm assuming we don't have any concessions because this market just doesn't require them. But all that will give us a lot more accurate estimate of what we could expect on the income side. And then likewise on the expenses, we start talking about the timing of some of the expenses. You have things like real estate taxes that are due once a year. You also have personal property taxes, which are due at the same time. So, you know, you escrow for them once a year, or you escrow for them every month, but you only pay them once a year. And so can I think through that? And then after all that's done, then we can start talking about like reserves, contingency, holdback, working capital, and how that kind of fits into the underwriting puzzle. And that's what we use to iterate that 10% number, you know, the CapEx assumption that we made earlier. You know, we assumed that number was 10% of purchase price. That may or may not be a reasonable assumption. We're going to test it. But I'm struggling to not say more because there's just a lot more we could go into, and I don't think we have time to open up any more can of worms tonight. But I think this is a good place to stop. What do you think, Josh?
Basically, what you're saying is the pro forma that we're going to be building out tomorrow is going to be a more definitive version of the P&L here. Whereas this is just on an annual basis over the course of 10 years. You're talking monthly down to the line item, down to how much money's outgoing for CapEx, how much cash you have in the bank, and how much that's outlaying. You're talking about a much more detailed version of this.
Yeah, and it's just for the first year, and you guys will see why, because like we make these assumptions, but when you build out this this pro forma budget, it gives you the numbers you can plug back into the Michael Blanc analyzer that are more accurate, and it also gives you something that's a budget that's already created, so you can talk to the property manager about it. I think, like I've talked about with some folks in here, I like to use the budget, and I like to ask the property manager to develop a budget, but if they don't, I give them ours and ask for their blessing. Hopefully it's a collaborative thing. So you're kind of killing a few birds with one stone. You know, iterating, it's not linear. There's these like feedback loops that happen at certain points, and you kind of have to know where they are to know when to iterate, because you know, when you start making changes at certain points, it can affect how other things shake out. So I think this will be a good place to stop. You know, when we go through the pro forma next week, I'm going to do some number crunching ahead. So again, you guys just aren't watching us do data entry all night and doing the calculations real time. I'll have the numbers there, but we'll just start with the blank sheet and we'll just fill it out quickly. And so you guys can kind of get a feel for just for the thought process, really. So
That
we'll,
pro forma-
we'll go
I
ahead.
was gonna say that pro forma you're talking about, that's something you're building out that everyone will have access to soon.
It's just that the template that I used for Marbella,
Okay.
it's just that same format.
Reggie, is that the budget that you sent me when we were talking? Is that the
Yeah,
same thing?
yeah, that's that budget template.
Cool.
I
like it.
think I think I had added a few things at the bottom because I had sent that to, to a broker. Or did I give you the blank version?
You gave me the blank one.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, then that is the true unadulterated one that I use from scratch. But yeah, that's what we'll be using. And we'll just kind of go through and fill it out. And at the end, it'll spit out the numbers we put back into our offer column here. And hopefully by that point, we've made some CapEx assumptions and we can start moving through some of the other tabs. Josh, do you have anything else, or should we just go ahead and open it up for questions?
I'm just noticing that Mr. Hart is traveling the world over there. He's changing his background. It's just throwing me off. But I was also laughing at all the analogies you've been using today, Reggie. It's good, but it's funny. You talk about unadulterated version, and then earlier today you said we were going to do something so that we could quickly lubricate the curriculum. This was interesting analogy.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
language is boring unless you make it exciting. You gotta.
We can definitely
adds
open it
to
up
the
for
board.
questions if anyone has any specific to the scenarios page, because obviously there's a lot of pages to the analyzer, and pretty much everything we went over today was just that. And again, we'll be going over more advanced stuff next week.
Hey, Reggie, Jay and I were speaking to a broker today, and this is the property tax is a big one here, obviously in Texas, but the assumptions on that, they typically assume just like a 25% increase, but they're not assuming the purchase price analysis that the county's probably going to put onto it. What is your philosophy on property tax and the assumption on it in the first year, the second year? And because, give you for instance, here in Texas, a lot of times they'll discount a little bit based on the purchase price, but because the tax rates, though, like in Dallas County, you're almost looking at 2.5%. So it's pretty significant. So I'm just trying to make sure we have the right assumptions and how to challenge these guys if we come back and have a significant change in what we're assuming on that.
Sure. So I'm the tax protester of the group. Taxation is theft. But it's going to vary from municipality to municipality. And so first thing I would do is go to the county tax assessor site and see how they assess. Like for instance, in Mobile County, where some of our properties are, they just recently, they reassessed properties in April of for instance, in the 2023 tax year, they assess in April 2023. And then you pay that tax at the end by December 2023. But when they assess the property in April of 2023, they're looking at the property as it was from October 21 to September of 22. All right, so the taxes are assessed in arrears. And so that's important. There's always almost kind of like a year lag in the valuation. So, bad news is, like in Mobile County, if valuations start to or plummet and rents go along with it, then you're struggling for a year because you're still going to see an increase after that's already started. But I would just encourage you to go to the tax assessor website, confirm how they assess taxes. And then what they do is once they appraise the property or assess the property, they'll multiply it by some fudge factor. Like Mobile, it's 20%. And they'll call that the assessed value, I think. When they appraise it, I think that in Mobile County, they call that the fair market value. So once you multiply it by whatever that percentage is, in Mobile County, it's 20%. That gives you an assessed value. And then they multiply the assessed value by basically like a composite millage rate. So like in Mobile County, there's like 6 or 7 different categories of taxes. They each have their own millage rate. They just sum up to something, but it turns out to be about 6.35% of the assessed value is what the taxes end up being. So it's different everywhere, but that's how it's done in Mobile. And I've seen it in a lot of other municipalities too, but I think it's really important for underwriting because property tax is something that can jump up quickly. I mean, we saw our property tax at a property jump up by 45% year over year before we protested it. If I wouldn't have protested it, and by the way, when I protested it, it actually reduced it by 50% from the previous year because we were able to show a low NOI because we had renovations going on, some management troubles. And so it actually kind of helped us in a way. But it's very important to underwrite that accurately and know the timing of when that hits because it's not always in year one. It's typically you'll feel that pain in year two.
Got it. You're not using purchase price. You're just assuming, hey, if I do XYZ improvements in first year, the year after that, it's going to increase based on the valuation of those improvements, not based on purchase price, correct?
Yeah, I don't base it on purchase price. I base it on projected NOI.
Got it. Okay.
Because the assessors they do use the income approach on commercial properties, and I will say this is just something I just learned this tax season. Usually when I send my justifications on the tax protest forms, I spell out my calculations. Like here's the cap rate I use, here's our NOI, here's our financials. What they actually do is they look at how much at the percentage that property tax is of NOI, or I'm sorry, of revenue. So let's just say it's 2% of the income. Well, then they'll they'll add in 2% to the market cap rate, and they evaluate the property independent of property tax because obviously if they're increasing property tax, it decreases your value, but it's for the next year.
Got it.
So but yeah, the purchase price will usually be more than the valuation that they use, but they could assess in arrears, and then so you'll usually see that increase later, and they use what they call a loaded cap rate, or the cap rate that's corrected for the property tax. Did that answer your question, Alan?
No, it does. The only thing I need to figure out, I guess, in our area is what cap rate the assessors would possibly use for that. But yeah, no, that is helpful. I appreciate that.
Yeah, glad to help.
Taxes. Woo woo. I see some people dying to ask questions, and I see some people just like slumming. Oliver's over there chilling. Can't even see anyone else. All I see is a bunch of names.
So, underwriting makes some people go to sleep. I love it.
I'm trying to love it. I'm so glad we're going through this because it's my main bottleneck. And I know it's like, I've got to get this if I can make an offer and do everything else. So super glad we're going through this.
So Reggie, when you fill out the scenario tab, I mean, you kind of have most of the information you need in order to identify like if this is a deal you want to move forward with or not. I guess, how do you look at it once you fill out those inputs, and how do you know if you want to move forward, and kind of like how would you determine what strategy you'd use moving forward?
Well, so, I think a few weeks back, Matt showed you kind of his back of the envelope calc to see if it might be worth pursuing. He basically just looked at the NOI as is and a projected NOI, and I think he showed that spreadsheet. That's kind of the high filter. This is just think of a level down. And so I always let the numbers like tell me the story, and that's the metaphor that I always use, because when I get to the end, even if it gives me something that doesn't look that attractive from a return standpoint, that's when I can go back and start like validating some of the assumptions that I made and start making some corrections up or down. And so if, like, for instance, we were conservative on the rents because that's what the competition was doing. But if we thought there was some way that we could set ourselves apart, or, there's this other income potential, okay, well, maybe we can set the rents a little higher. Or, maybe there's an opportunity to individually meter all the water, and then the expenses completely go off the P&L. Because when there's a pass-through cost, by the way, guys, so it's better to not have utilities on your P&L and have them metered than it is to pay the bills and then charge your tenants back for them. So I don't know if anybody has ever thought about it like that, but from a P&L standpoint, it's better to not have it on there as a pass-through cost, because you can't even legally charge 100% of what you're paying out. If you exceed that, then they look at you like a utility authority, and you're subject to all kinds of regulatory scrutiny and everything. And so a lot of times it's nice if you can just kind of pass the buck and not have it on the P&L at all. But as I kind of build that out, like I like to see, like when I'm making the offer, if I'm doing some renovations, things aren't going to look great. I look at kind of that 5-year plan, and if I can actually refi out in year 2 or 3, which we could have done Matt's, back of the envelope calc, because what did I say? $223 a month got us $150,000 a year and potential rents that we could start capturing. Maybe we don't get that in year 1, but that's the potential. And so if I assume that we're able to chip away at that over time, $150,000 extra dollars in revenue, and we have a 50% operating expense ratio, then that's an additional $75,000 a year in NOI. And if I just assume a 5% cap rate, which is pretty reasonable for the Orange Beach area, I mean, just the rent bumps alone will get us what? That's a $1.5 million in increase in valuation just from boosting the rents to market. And so, I look at that like, okay, well, they have us raising about 5 million. And so if we increase the valuation by 1.5 when we go to refi, it's probably not quite enough to pay out our investors, at least not in year 1, maybe not even in year 2. But it's still worth further investigation. And I think that's where we'll probably pick back up next week. Did that answer your question, Ethan?
Yeah, it definitely did. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. Yeah.
Hey, Reggie, speaking to that, when you guys assume a RUBS model or breaking out the utilities, what cost factor do you assume to actually put that in place?
I usually assume 80% of what the T12 expense has been for that. So, if they're paying $12,000 or let's say $10,000 a year in water, I'll assume that I can bill back 80% of that.
No, I mean actually the cost of the system to put it in place. So that the actual RUB system or the metering itself, like what is your assumed cost to build that and put it in place?
Well, that's actually not something that I've ever personally had experience with.
Okay.
Josh, do you know any? Are you familiar with any of the cost around that? I know that some of our colleagues have done that before, but
Yeah.
we never have.
I mean, basic rubs, there's no cost to do anything because you're not building any meters. You're literally just taking what they're already paying, charging them for it, around 80% of it for it, and immediately increasing your income with $0 spent on anything. The rubs is actually really simple and a really quick way to flip a switch and make more money from property. Actual individualized metering is a whole nother ball game. There's some things that, depending on what it is, sometimes I've heard before that the county will actually come out and pay, like they'll pay for the meters. So you don't have to pay for the meter, but you have to pay for the infrastructure that goes to the meter, like from the meter
plumbing.
to the unit.
Yeah, we had that situation actually in Nashville at a property I was working at. We were metering electricity, and NES was the provider of electricity in that area, and they did the meter installation. They basically, up until the wall of the unit, going inside the electrical wiring, the converter, all of that is owned by that municipality, and they installed it and they get the money from it essentially.
Oh, so for the rubs model, you're saying that once you individually meter it, they get the money. Well, that makes sense because it's going to be their meter
Yeah,
now.
but it's individually metered and you lose that expense altogether, right? So you're
Right.
negating the expense, but you're not dealing with the they don't set up an account with you, they don't pay through you. You're not seeing that money anymore. It disappears. So it's
Yeah,
no
and
longer an
that
expense
is,
either.
yeah, that is a better way. When you reduce an expense, it just creates less doubt of additional costs because the income's not never guaranteed, but the cost is always there.
I know you can do the
What-
same thing for Wi-Fi too. I've seen really like you can put fiber optics or something installed in your entire property and the Wi-Fi company will pay for that entire installation. They'll give you all the whole infrastructure you need for fiber in each unit. And then they just do some kind of profit sharing or something with you because for them paying for that. And then they also want to require all of your residents to have to use their internet service.
Yeah,
But
and I've seen
nonetheless,
some negatives to that. I will say
really?
that. Yeah, just because some people are very loyal to their provider, right? They're like, we like AT&T, we want AT&T. That's a make it or break it rental criteria for us. I've seen that. And so like we have Spectrum at the properties in Durham, and I've seen like 6-7 applicants or potential applicants just say, no, thanks. We want AT&T. So
Camden does that. They force you to have cable and internet. And I hate cable. They're like, well, you've had it this whole time. I'm like, I don't watch it.
They had that same infrastructure at the apartment complex I was staying at before we bought this house. And I mean, for me personally, it wasn't an issue. I guess I'm not one of those really loyal internet type people. And the service was pretty all right. But the benefit to you as the owner is that not only do you not have to pay for all the Wi-Fi, but equally you can charge extra on top of what it actually costs to run the program. So let's say it only costs you $20 a month for you to pay for whatever fiber optic service they've just installed. And then you can charge your residents like $75 a month, make a huge spread, and then do whatever profit sharing on top of that. However they structure that, if that's how they wanted to structure it.
Is
yeah,
it
I'm
custom-
seeing.
What's that?
is it customary to always offer like Wi-Fi or internet to your tenants? I mean, I know I'm a tenant like in New York, and it's very common just to like get your own Spectrum equipment, and like they just don't even have it as an option. Like, does it kind of look poorly as a landlord, like if you're not offering that to tenants in other parts of the country?
I think it's going to ultimately depend on your location, asset class. Like if it's a C-class property, I'm not providing internet personally, at least with our properties. Maybe it's an option later down the road if you had a really nice C-class property, but then at that point it's probably B-class. So I think if you're on a higher tiered type of asset, then probably 100%. I mean, if I've got an A-class property, everyone's going to want internet. It's just guaranteed. So I would love to be able to provide that and make the money on top of it instead of leaving it up to them to figure out. Because then I'm like leaving money on the table. I don't know. What do you think, Reggie?
If you can turn it to a revenue stream, I support it. Like, you know, like for instance, at Riverside, that's our one class A. I would think that would be a great candidate for installing Gigafy or, you know, one of these other companies. Because the thing with rubs, if you're just looking at this from like a finance standpoint, unless what you're paying in your utility bills, if you don't charge that back to the tenant and mark it up by your weighted average cost of capital, you're literally eroding your profitability, and you're also incurring more accounts receivable, which affects collections. And then, you know, you can't evict somebody necessarily for not paying their rubs. Or should I say, it's a lot harder to. You'd have to stop accepting rent as well. But and plus, it's just an administrative headache. I mean, one of our properties, we had to pay, was it $20,000 a building? No, 20,000. It was like $10,000 or $20,000 4 or 5 times over for the deposit on the water. And so, you know, that's just money that's just sitting there. It's tied up. It's not doing any work. It's not earning a return. That's extra money we had to raise that we're having to pay a pref on. So anyway, unless you can turn something into a revenue stream, I'm a big fan of pushing it off the P&L.
Does that answer the question, Ethan?
It does. Thank you.
Sweet.
Is that something that you would see as well on like insurance? You know, because I know some apartments they'll say you must have renter's insurance, or we have our own renter's insurance that you can pay for. Is that something? Because we have an apartment and they're like, oh, you have to have renter's insurance. We won't even start your lease until you show that you have bought this renter's insurance. And I'm like, why are they trying to push us to get their renter's insurance? Why can't I just go price it from somewhere else?
Well, two reasons. Number one, you can upsell that, and there's a small revenue stream that comes off it. We do that at one of our properties, or actually 3 of them. It cost us $7. We charge the tenant $11. Not a huge honking deal, but you spread it across 148 units, and it adds up.
For sure.
Also, when all your tenants have renter's insurance, it helps you on the property insurance side,
I was
because
going to ask,
you're shifting some of the liability away from the insurance company, and they like that. So then, you know, directionally your premium will go down. So it helps you in 2 ways. You get a small revenue stream, and it helps your property insurance go down.
I guess it would be similar to like your own home when they say, oh, do you have an alarm on the property? And so I guess, is that like a value add you would consider as well on your B+ property or A property, having alarm installs in every unit?
I would say so. We actually did, well, we didn't do alarms, but we did fire suppression systems over the stoves.
Oh, nice.
And that got us a measurable, like a double-digit ROI on what we invested. It was like, I think it was like $250 a unit that we had to install over 88 units. It wasn't a huge cost, but it reduced our our insurance premium by several $1,000s. And then when I look at what that did to our valuation, it was well worth it. So like we probably spent, let's just say $5,000. And if it made our insurance go down by $5,000, it doesn't seem like a big win. But when you propagate that out to the valuation, if you save $5,000 and you divide that by your cap rate, well, boom, it just increased your valuation by that much. So that's how I look at it. To me, that's the power of reducing expenses / increasing income.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right, everybody. I am going to take the recording of this call and the Excel sheet that we just utilized and the T12 and all the documents we just utilized, so you guys can take a look at that. And I'll add that to, basically I'll put it underneath underwriting, but we'll start a new folder. So instead of it being part, I think we like 25 videos in underwriting. So we'll quantify all that as underwriting basics, and we'll start a new advanced tab. And this will basically be part 1 for that.
Cool beans.
Sweet. So next Monday is what? The 19th? Cool. Juneteenth. And we'll be here going over the next chapter of basics. So if anyone has any questions between now and then, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, you guys have a fantastic weekend, and happy Father's Day to everybody. That's a
Happy
father out there.
Father's Day.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Bye,
Appreciate it.
everybody.
See you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.